What's up, you all? It is Rebel of the Boo. Just kidding. It's obviously still bright. This is a Terse for the horror video. Mr. Logic coming at you, Quantitative Logic coming at you, for folk Hage and whatever else. I can't remember all the aliases. It's late. I haven't used them in forever. The horror video, right? Terse, right? Shorthand version for the video that was just done, pretty much. This is going to be around the same time that I'm editing Moon, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be done sooner, or because of the fact that it's going to be done sooner. So the phone doesn't screw up. The sound has been getting a little bit off. If it is, it's going to be a pain in the arse to edit, and I'm going to have to get a new phone. Well, let's just be honest. I sort of got this video. I did get this influence when I was watching Lore Runner. He is a pretty small but way bigger than me YouTuber who was playing and analyzing horror as presented in Half-Life 2, which I'm not familiar with. I didn't really care, not because that I don't care about Half-Life 2 or him, let alone, but because he didn't. It was an excuse to play through Half-Life 2. Let me be honest. It was just an excuse to play through Half-Life 2. So I decided to look at a whole bunch of games myself. I started with Clock Tower 3. Then I looked at some other ones. I'm trying to think. They weren't that bad. Yes, they were. Resident Evil 4, then Resident Evil, and then, you know, games that aren't nearly as good at presenting horror as Clock Tower 3, and then Fatal Frame 2, which was actually better. And then I talked about what made each scene work or not in terms of horror. And there were some things that I left out because, I'm gonna get off my ass, because I can't hit every single thing. But unlike just playing through a game and commenting every so often during the stream, I wanted to go ahead, and the dude is good. He does pretty good work. But I wanted to go ahead and, as the analysis guy, give my analysis for why every single element that I could find of these scenes worked from my point of view. So the first thing that I talked about was the sense of horror versus, well, horror is the broad term because people use that as the genre term. It is the generic sense. And then I divvy that up into two different subsets. The first is scariness, and the second is alertness. If you are scared, you are scared for any particular reason, right? Alert is a subset of scared, possibly. But what makes alert not mutually inclusive with scary, and why I differ them, is because if you are alert, what's the word I'm looking at? The implication is that you are, I think I said risen on your toes, which is very terrible. But it's like you are, I said alarmed, which is better, but it's more like you are heightened. You are now actively trying to perceive a threat, a possible threat, or a threat that is very real in front of you, or that you've already encountered and you know you'll have to encounter again, etc., etc. It's the difference between, as I said before, well, I'm not going to say the entire analogy, but what I said before is the difference between thinking that something might be boding ill for you in the future for whatever reason, and you know that for sure it is, and now your adrenaline is running and blah, 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 blah. That's the two different, and some people might say that the first is more horrifying, and some people might say that the second is more horrifying, but I'm talking about how well each presents each on their own merits. Each game presents each subset on their own merits. And the reason I do that is because I am trying to be more objective in saying it, and I'm not saying what scares me or what makes me more alert. I am more able, as a result, to look at each character in these games and see, and yes, I can talk about it from a meta sense too, and I do, how it impacts we, the viewers, and what they were trying to do to we, the viewers, players, whatever. But what I'm really trying to do is see in terms of just the lay rules of what is scary versus what is alert. What are some examples of the former versus the latter? Then once you have the groundwork there, the ground rules, then you can go ahead and say, okay, this is what they tried to do with scariness with regard to the main character A, and then alertness with regard to the main character B. Sometimes in the same work, sometimes they're leaning more towards scariness or alertness, depending on different works, right? It might be something where one work leans more towards a scary theme, and one more work leads more toward an alert theme. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say straight up that Fatal Frame 2 was the most powerful, in my opinion, of these scenes that I saw. And I was starting with just the intro scenes, but then I went into the gameplay because I want to be more varied. So just picked a bunch of random games, really. And Fatal Frame 2 was always the winner. Like, I knew that was going to be the winner for me, even though I forgot what I had chosen overall. I knew that Fatal Frame 2 was, when I saw it, it was definitely the most horrifying intro. And then after that was Clock Tower 3. Now, as I say this, do note that I talked about Resident Evil 4, and I ragged on it, and I talked about Haunting Ground, which is less loved, but people still like it from people who played it, from what I know anyway. And I ragged on it. And I also ragged on, what's another game that people like that I ragged on? I can't remember. Like, they were nothing, Alone in the Dark, but that's a game that was like, people might have been scared by it, but because of the uncanny valley as to how it was presented back in the day with ugly polygons, like, just sort of obvious there, right? I think Roberta, what's her name? Roberta, I can't remember her last name. Roberta, the lady who made Phantasmagoria, she was not scared by that game. I remember her saying that in the interview. And it makes sense because, well, besides her having been an adult, and most of us when we played computer games like that, we were kids. I know I was. Like, just a straight up kid. I didn't play those type of games, but around that age, I was not an adult. And so, you're just less likely to consider the fact that it's a programming limitation that might cause the uncanny valley. You just see it as some weird stuff is on the screen. The dude's face looks weird, and the music is scary, and all that stuff. The MIDI music, which means it basically just how it sounds depends on the computer playing it on. To me, in like the most layman terms ever. And I am sounding so out of breath right now because it is so dang cold. I could turn the heater on, but if I turn the heater on, then the phone might overheat. I got a phone recording like down here that I'm trying to check on to make sure it's still recording every so once in a while. But I don't want to like ruin. I don't think it's closer to the bottom of the car, so it's probably picking up more noise, road noise. So whatever. This phone's probably gonna screw the pooch anyway. The main one, this dang Pixel 3. Let me have more faith in it. Who knows? I don't want to jinx myself here. The point is, sorry for that tangent. The point is that I'm talking a lot of mess about games that people might like, but I'm not talking mess just to talk mess. I'm going through as of everything, and I'm giving my reasons as to why certain things rate higher for me. But really, I only really rated 2 of them. I only said Clock Tower 3 was my second favorite in terms of what I think is horrifying and how I think it presents it well enough. And then Fatal Frame 2 is my favorite. I didn't talk about the rest of the games. I just talked about the intro of those games, right? Of those 2 games. I didn't talk about the gameplay mechanics. I didn't talk about any of that stuff. I just showed the intro cutscenes and a couple of seconds of gameplay afterwards. Same with Haunting Ground, same with Resident Evil, same with Resident Evil 4, same with Friday the 13th on NES, etc., right? Just because I wanted to talk about not the plots of the games, but the opening atmosphere that's designed to settle you into a specific terrified mood or just on edge, anxious mood, anxiety stricken. If it does its job well, and it might for you, it might not for you, for the next person, vice versa, but to try and lay out some reasoning as to why that's the case. I go into these games, intros, I go way into them. The Clock Tower 3 one probably took around 40, 50 minutes. The Resident Evil 4 one, maybe 10 minutes shorter. Then I tried to chop it way down. Otherwise, I would have been talking about Fatal Frame 2 for that long, if not longer. But I couldn't be there all night because I was like in my garage. And I wanted to keep a theme. Oh, it's scary, garage, nighttime, lights off. No fan, you're cold, you're freezing. And I just could not stand that. Like, I can stay in the cold, I can stutter and suffer, but my throat will give out. So I had to cut it a little bit down for the rest of them. But as you can see though, even though I cut it down, the thing is still like close to 5 hours. So it's like, you know, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. I spent long talking about all of them. I talked about a specific scene from Chrono Trigger. I talked about Knights of the Old Republic. I even had a little Spider-Man John at the end. I'm sure we as kids, or whoever, if we were kids back then, remember being scared of that. For me, it's like time is relative, so I was like basically a kid compared to now anyway. What else can I say without getting too in depth here, because I don't want to make this video too long. My terses already end up being way long. You might be wondering what makes Clock Tower 3's intro so good, or makes Fatal Frame's intro so much better. Well, I'll tell you after I turn this fan on for a second. Okay, so Clock Tower 3's, let's just compare that to Resident Evil 4. Okay, because Resident Evil 1 isn't that bad, aside from the bad voice acting mainly. And you could say the bad acting too, like motion acting, but really voice acting. But that's obvious. Resident Evil 4 should have less of an excuse. These damn tractor trailers, how many of them are there? They're like 5 right next to me. Gosh, hate them semis. How are they semis anyway? What's a full truck if those motherfuckers are semis? Anyhow, continuing on, it wouldn't be fair to use a game from 1996, and I don't even know when it was recorded, as opposed to a game from 2004, and I don't know when it was recorded, but it was recorded after 1996, because the newer game should be theoretically better at portraying what it's trying to portray, because if nothing else, it can use the older game as a jumping point, a point of reference. It did, but it sucked at it. But I'm not going to get into that because I like now, because I do in the actual analysis, how it fails at building upon just the intro. I'm not talking about anything else, but how the intro fails at building upon Resident Evil 1 and namely 2, since we're talking about Leon S. Kennedy here, or whatever the frick his name is. Anyhow, going into this game versus Clock Tower 3. Resident Evil 4, to abridge it seriously here, I'm not going to do a huge comparison because I already did that. Resident Evil 4 starts off with some weird, let me not be racist, I don't know, I wouldn't be being racist, but I don't know the genre of what it's called. I have something in my mind, but I'm just going to go ahead and say Mexican music, and if that's too much for you, then fuck off. And the point is that it's this upbeat, lively type of jingle, right? Like with the maracas playing. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know. Like the drum that just makes you want to get out and shimmy yourself. You know, the Mexicans got that hype music. They got that music that just gets you off your seat. And that's all well and good in a different sort of context, but like we're trying to be scary here, right? We're trying to be, like, maybe it can put you in some sort of alert mood or something all of a sudden happens, but that gets into the second issue because we're dealing with a guy who was just way too cool for this school. There is nothing fazing him. He goes ahead and makes snide remarks to guys who are obviously intimidated and are trying to hold it in. And since those other guys are being assholes in the car with him while they're dropping him off to try and find the president's daughter or whatever, you don't really care that much about them anyway, right? The two cops. And then you, I don't want to stay in this lane. And then you got him going into a house. It's very limited what you can do. You can believe like you go straight. You can shoot a couple crows if you want to be a dick, and then you just walk into a house. You can't go anywhere else. You can't. You got to jump from the top of the floor through a window into the point is that you go straight into a house. But the real point is that there's not that much room to explore and get a sense of immersion about this environment that's supposed to be theoretically scary, because you just walk straight in and then there's a cutscene. Bam, 10 seconds in. Clock Tower 3 doesn't do that. Clock Tower 3 starts with an extended cutscene too, but it starts with a girl who has no idea what the hell is going on, except for just enough hints to make her worry about her safety and her mother's safety. And then there is a mysterious villain who appears, and then he harasses her and leaves, and she's just left to her fate. And that's it. Meanwhile, Special Agent Sergeant Trooper Leon is just rolling in there with this heavy-duty combat pistol. Literally rolling in there. Hands, what you call it, to a picture of a girl. Have you seen this little girl? To some guy who obviously looks, well, to any mortal, he would look threatening. Ay, cállate, cabrón. And then, sorry for asking. Sheesh. It's the locals here. Oh, I'm gonna slip this back in my pocket. Whoa! Do a barrel roll. Because the dude tries to hit him with a hatchet or something. And he literally does a combat roll out the way. Roll out. Roll out. Are we serious now? Are we trying to feign any sort of intimidation factor for this poser right now? Okay, I can't call him a poser. He's just that nice. But it's posing as a horror game, and he's the main character. So come on, don't they call it survival horror? I mean, yes, it is a horror game, because this is that's debatable. But it is a survival game, and I'm sure somebody in there is scared. Maybe the president's daughter or somebody. It isn't, what's her name? Hunnigan. You can see, if you know anything about Clock Tower 3, let alone Clock Tower, which I also covered, which is scarier than Clock Tower 3, and more terrifying than Clock Tower 3, in my opinion. Because Alyssa can fight back in Clock Tower 3, and in Clock Tower is not happening. The reason why... Unless you count pushing the dude for a couple seconds. The reason why that is way better than Resident Evil 4, Clock Tower 3, is because in Resident Evil 4, we've got a situation where this dude is not intimidated by hardly anything. He shoots the dude in the head, and he tells Hunnigan radios him like immediately after, like his lifeline. What was that? I heard a gunshot from my headquarters. The hell? I just had to terminate a hostile. It was a civilian. Don't worry, I took care of him. But, and besides that, you're trying to be cool. Aren't you trying to find the president's daughter? You going around shooting everybody? Isn't that a little adverse to the possibility of your completing your mission? But that never comes up. Because now it's zombies. Oh, we gotta get away from the zombies. But he doesn't really notice what's going on. I mean, at least not in the intro. He doesn't call attention to any of this stuff, even though he's already seen it in the second game and he knows about it from the first game. But the whole zombie experiment, the whatever the name of the lab organization, I don't care, Umbrella, whatever the hell. Maybe it's a difference. I don't know. There is some resemblance, okay? Let's not be jerks about this. There's some resemblance, and he does not call attention to it. He's just too busy. Okay, I gotta kill these. I gotta get out of here. I got style. No, fuck that. And then in Clock Tower 3, she is none of that show-offness, okay? None of that bravado, none of that hot air. She just says, get away from me. And the dude is like, you're all alone now, little girl. Ha 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 ha. He just walks up the stairs casually, and then she's just left clutching herself in utter horror as she looks on, and isn't sure what to do next. Now, she can try and leave that house, but it's not going to work because her mom had already told her that she was marked for death and she has to hide. And she's just gone into the place so she's not just getting out of there. And then more importantly for her, she wants to find out what her mother's status is, how her mother is doing right now. Now, she heard that her mom is all but dead as far as she's been told by this guy, but she doesn't know for sure. And as I come up on 25 minutes here, that's just better because there's just so many things unanswered that she really wants to know and doesn't have the power to try to find the answer to immediately. Right? Not off the bat. Leon might not either, but it doesn't really matter because he's got, his mission is to find somebody who he doesn't really care about all that. I'm not going to say he doesn't care about the president's daughter, but does that really weigh on him as much as Alyssa and her own mother? No, not really, because for one, he hadn't spoken to her. It's just an assignment that he's gotten. Alyssa had spoken to her mother on the phone and then it just cut off. Right? Or I'm sorry, I apologize. That's not what happened. Alyssa had heard a message that her mother had sent. Right? She was reading it in her head. She was reading a letter from her mother in her head. And she was really internalizing that. That was really reaching her. Almost as though her mother was sitting right next to her and trying to warn her that she was in danger. And then all of a sudden, her mom calls, supposedly. And by the time she's rushed there to get to the phone that the headmaster or whatever teacher told her her mom had for her, it's dead. The phone is dead. So there's just much more tension in Alyssa's heart right now, in her chest, than Leon's. Because Leon is like, he's got a pistol, if nothing else. And he can just abandon the mission. I'm not trying to say that he could just like get out of there with no problems. But that's just one objective that he has to worry about less, because he will have dirt off your shoulder. You got to get that dirt off your shoulder with regards to the girl. Don't worry about it. You know? Why? Just worry about yourself. But it's not really the case with Alyssa, because her and her mom's fates are more or less tied, because they're in the same house for one. At least, like, that's the last place that she knew anything about her mother was the call. Dude said that her mother had gone out, but as far as she knows, it's from the call, which was from in that lodge, the same house. So now that she's stuck in that house, all but entirely, whatever she finds out about her mom and wants to is going to be intrinsically related to the danger she's going to have to face. Leon can just decide to go and fuck off and do whatever the hell else he wants to do, and with no inhibitions. Nothing's gonna stop him as long as he's got ammo. And Alyssa doesn't have it. I'm just talking about the intro. She doesn't have any ammo. Now let's go on to why that is not better than Fatal Frame 2, because I like to talk about a whole bunch of other games. I can talk about tons of games for days. Those are the real offenders, right? Haunting Ground is so boring, it's not even worth talking about. Resident Evil 4 is also beloved, and so that's why it is worth talking about, even though it sucks as far as that intro goes. Now, like, again, I'm not trying to say Resident Evil 4 is a bad game, and when you throw certain expectations out the window, it's not a bad game. It's a pretty good game, at least from what I know. It's certainly better than Resident Evil 0, but anyhow, let's get off of that tangent. Let's get off of that train, right? Fatal Frame 2. Let's just list the reasons why Fatal Frame 2 is better than Clock Tower 3. What the intro in Fatal Frame 2 does better, and how it fooled me so deliciously, thinking like it was going to be so much more than what, but it's not really fair, because the expectations are way too high. The only time I can remember any game setting expectations that high, any story, as a matter of fact, setting expectations that high from its intro and delivering, is Moon. I'm thinking of a whole bunch of games with great stories, but the intros aren't all that, including Chrono Trigger. Fatal Frame 2 has such a great intro, but it doesn't deliver on the rest of the story. It's just too much. The intro is just too high. It's like if you've got an 11 out of 10 intro, you can't expect the rest of it to be that good. It's like Scorching Ping Pong Girls. The first 3 episodes, which I count as the intro, would amount to an 11 out of 10. However, the rest of Scorching Ping Pong Girls is a 10 out of 10. When you're off the scale like that, it just raised that much more. Sort of how when you're talking about power scaling, and you've got, or you know, just class rankings in general, and you got your whatever low rank F, G, H, I, J, all the way up to S, the highest rank, right? A is the highest practical rank, but Super A, S class, is the highest literal rank, and so it extends up into anything. Like there is no measure beyond that. And so when I say 11 out of 10, I mean there is no measure beyond that. And so you're not likely, once you're in the 11 out of 10 range, like with the Fatal Frame 2 intro, to bring it back, to have anything able to match that. Even if the rest of the plot were a 10 out of 10, it's not going to match that intro. It's just too lofty a standard to try and excel to. Now, with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and enumerate some reasons here why Fatal Frame 2's intro is that much better than Clock Tower 3's, which was good enough for me to be talking about to the extent that it was like damn near an hour. Fatal Frame 2, and again, in terms of the horror, right, the horrific elements, in terms of the genre. The first thing is that Miyu is regretting stuff in Fatal Frame 2. She's regretting what's gone on with her sister. And I talk about that the most because that is the most important part of that intro. It's akin to you are going through a dark forest, right? In the woods. And you wanna know why it's dark? It's dark because it was light at first, right? You had the park lights going on, and you knew you had to be out of it, the nature trail, by a certain hour, by a certain time, and you're running late, and you don't know how late, you forgot your whatever, but you thought you were okay. And then the lights go out. And so you can find your way back because it's a trail, right? You're not just straight up lost in the forest. Then you might as well just park your ass until morning and not get no more loss. But it's still scary, right? It's still very, very frightening. It's very, very possibly alerting. That's what's going on in Fatal Frame 2, because this main character, Miyu, has these worries about her past with regard to what she did to her sister. What is this in my car that's just beating around? Something with her sister. What is it? Is it this? She has something going on with her sister. I seriously don't want to spoil it. Needless to say, she got her sister hurt. What that amounts to is that she is ruminating on that. She's dwelling on that. And she is so caught up in that she doesn't realize when something happens to her sister. I'm not going to go ahead and say too much, but she doesn't realize, and she has to go ahead, and her sister's been caught up in something, and she's now trying to chase her sister. Whereas if she weren't in her regrets, if she weren't in her sorrows, her suffering and all that stuff, if she weren't distracted, basically, she would have been able to catch what was happening with her sister in time. Just like in the past when she had let whatever bad thing happen to her sister. It's trying to be like poetry, right? It's trying to be like George Lucas and they rhyme and all that stuff. But it's doing it well because this serves to accentuate the horror as presented actually in the damn story. It's doing it to the extent that, yes, I'm parking. You can just drive right past me. It's doing it to the extent that she is letting something horrible happen to her sister twice. And both times not meaning it, but the second time especially so, if you know it in context. The first time she's sort of playing around, and then something unexpectedly happens. And the second time she's so distraught, which is a form of stress too. It's a tension. It's not scary tension, but it is, you are preoccupied with something on your mind, just like you're concerned with trying to do whatever else in the forest, but lingering in your mind is the time limit, right? Here she's concerned with what had gone on in the past, and she's talking about Mayu, like Mayu's saying everything's good and all that stuff, and then don't worry, remember we used to come out here and all that stuff, but then Miyu's actually thinking about the deeper stuff, the more strenuous stuff, the more hurtful stuff. I'm not gonna go ahead and air my business out, but I know of somebody who is not the best driver, okay? And that person is now afraid to not drive, but back up. Like back into parking spaces, back out of parking spaces, put the car in reverse. Because they always have this nagging thought at the back of their mind that even though things just are all right as of now, however illogical, anything could just straight up go wrong. Something just behind their car. Somebody had left like a trash can in the street. Somebody had parked behind them and they were so groggy when they pulled out of the driveway that they didn't realize the car was behind them when they were walking into their car. Like somebody had stepped out and they were walking past them in the line for the supermarket or whatever in the parking lot, and they didn't notice. And anything, even if you have a backup camera that stops working or something like that, and somebody who you might hit, they don't realize you're about to hit them, so they don't warn you, or just anything, right? Your windows aren't that big. Like for my example, I'm driving a 2004 Camry, and it's not new. It's not 2024, so you don't have to worry about no blind spots, right? I mean, you don't have to worry. Well, you don't. I didn't mean to say it that way. You don't have to worry about any blind spots, not huge ones, right? So when you look back there, you can sort of see what's back there, right? Right? It's not like the whatever pillar trunk just goes all the way up, and so it like covers your eyes. You gotta look over that shit. You can just look straight back and see. Look at it. Look, you can just see straight back, right? It's an old car. Sorry about any noise or maybe taking that thing off the magnet. But you still want to double take. You're not sure because there's been an impression left in your mind, a negative experience, negative schemata that have made it so that you are now scripted to expect the worst in this certain case. And whether it's with driving or whether it's with dealing with your sister, especially in this location, but in general. Now you are scripted to feel fear. And that's what's going on here. Again, especially in this location, but then it just adds another element as to why they're there, and then it gets more into better plot stuff. But that's not, I'm just talking about the intro there. As far as the intro is concerned, it's just a very good intro. It's just a very good intro because it's a very creepy setting. And the little sister, I believe, is brought her there. I can't remember all the details, but you can sort of pick up something like that from the intro. And so it's ironic because the little sister was the one who got hurt there before, and the older sister, the older one, she's got regrets, and she's still coming along. But you see how this is just crushing her mindset right now, her mind state. Clock Tower 3, it doesn't have that sense of regret. She's got her connection with her mother, but she doesn't really know her mother's condition, and she couldn't have known anything greater because her mother is keeping all these secrets from her. There is a sense in real life where you can, and in fiction too, where you can feel regret about things that you aren't like logically responsible for. But Alyssa doesn't feel this, at least not as presented in the intro, and so it doesn't matter, because especially Alyssa doesn't know the, again, condition her mother's in the intro. And that goes into a few things, actually. Alyssa does know the villain, right? I'm not saying like she knows exactly who that is. That's not really the point. The point is she knows that there is a villain. She knows of a villain. It is a creepy old man who was trying to get physical with her, and he didn't mean her any good at all. at all. You know, at all. She pried herself away from him, and he let her go, and then he went upstairs laughing, and that was it. He just disappeared, and she's still terrified, and I'm still terrified, and it makes it even creepier because he didn't try to actually do anything to her. Like, if he had actually tried to rape her, and then she tried to fight him off, right, especially if she succeeded, then it would have been less terrifying. Because now we don't know if she still has that plan, if he still has that planned, sorry, the exact same thing that I just said, or like worse, like that combined with torture, combined with killing her afterwards, combined with a whole bunch of other demons or people or whatever. You don't know, because right when he had her in the palm of her hand, he withdrew. But even then, unlike Fatal Frame 2, she knows what she has to look out for. She knows who she has to watch out for. With Fatal Frame 2, it's just Miyu trying to find her sister, trying to find where Mayu's going, trying to find where Mayu went when she failed to catch her for the second time. There is no villain. It's just her own psyche and the own inherent possibility, right, of failure, of her sister's death. That would be more or less an absolute, regardless of any villain, right? I mean, there could be somebody who kills Mayu. There could be Mayu just dies or whatever. But the point, like, is murdered. But the point is that Miyu doesn't know this. And so any possibility that conjures up into Miyu's depressed and manic head right now is conceptual. And that's what makes it so much more horrifying, because it's whatever you think as the player, likewise, from a meta point of view, in your mind could happen to Mayu. Just let your mind run free. And that's why it is unrestrained horror, as opposed to Alyssa. Yes, the guy could be preparing anything, but at least we know who could be preparing it. And we generally have an idea of where he went. He went somewhere upstairs, and who knows the layout of the lodge, or where he's lying in raid or anything. Or if he's even trying to, who knows, do anything. Who knows? That's the scariness, but there is a figure, there is a face to that horror. And then after that, Alyssa went there. she went to that house. Miyu was having to chase Mayu, but Alyssa went there. So she's horrified, right? But she has a choice in it, as opposed to Miyu. Yes, you could say the fact that she wanted to chase after her sister and all that stuff too. That's a choice. That is some agency too. But is it really to the same extent? No. And the reason why, I'm not just gonna say no and leave it at it like other YouTubers, but the reason why is because Alyssa's going after her mother because she cares so much about knowing what's happened to her mother. But she doesn't have any active fear going on while she has fear for her mother. And she has fear for something that her mother might be saying to her, but she knows that her mother, if she's telling the truth, her mother, that she should be hiding, Alyssa. And so Alyssa's making the conscious decision to not hide, and even if at like the risk of successfully saving her mother, die. Right? Even if like second worst comes to worst comes to worst is they both die. But second worst comes to worst, she's trying to see if she can save her mother, even if she might possibly die. That's the choice she's making. Now with Miyu and Mayu, Miyu is making a spur of the moment, not even really thinking about it, decision based on the guilt-ridden nature of her past and how that is pervading her brain right now. She can't think of anything else but that Mayu might be upset with her, might be cross with her, might not want anything to do with her. For why, we don't. I mean, obviously because of what might have happened in the past, but all of a sudden why, when she said everything was okay before, and she said, don't worry, I'm over that, all we can assume is that Mayu would have been holding that in, the actual anger that she felt, and now she's leaving. She can't hold it in anymore. Miyu can't stomach that, and so she runs after Mayu, not even really thinking about anything, but the danger isn't really there at that point. She is just trying to find her sister. As she's chasing her, like she's just trying to chase after her sister. Her sister's not really getting that far away because her sister still walks with a limp all those years later from the tragic accident. And then as she's going after her sister, when things seem as though that they're manageable, because it's just your younger sister with a limp, the forest starts to mold and devolve into what it becomes. And then she pushes through that still and manages to just grab Mayu's shoulder, just barely. She is haunted. And she is so afraid. She sees Mayu dead, basically. And she's so afraid that she blanks out. And then Mayu is gone. It's not anywhere near as purposeful as Clock Tower 3. Nowhere near. It is not even close. You can just see how everything is not only accidental. I was going to say accidental, but also it's due to something that she had caused. It's due to something that Miyu had caused. It's wanting you get a sense of wanting to arrive at some closure, wanting to right some wrongs somehow through her words, because she was going to say, Mayu, about that time, and then Mayu was already leaving. And then that's when she got up and said, Mayu, wait, where are you going? Mayu. And then that's when she started running after Mayu. She wanted to confess that entire time. And not just say sorry, but like pour her heart out to her sister. And so she was just caught up in the spell of something much greater. And that brings on not only the scariness, but the alertness. Because she has no freaking clue what the fuck is going on. I don't mean that in a funny way. She has no clue what the fuck. She doesn't know if this has to do with her or not. If this is something she is deserving. And I could have gone into this much more, but I didn't want to, because the damn thing was already like almost an hour and 30 minutes at that point. Or 2 hours. Fuck. I don't know how long it was. But it was long, man. And it's just too long to talk about, even as good as this intro is. The amount of guilt that is conveyed within that, like, 5 minutes. It's not, it's just way too long. It's like 2 minutes. It's unbelievable. It's massive. It's insane. It's just straight up insane. You've got a girl who is so scared about herself, and all she can do is still call out to her sister, Mayu, are you there? Mayu, if you can hear me. And the forest is just the most insidious poisoned black right now. Everything's just changed. And all she can think about is finding her sister. Obviously afraid for her own life. You can just see it on her face. That's still exposition. Done well. And it's just like with Clock Tower 3, except with this, there's that added sense of I'm seeing what I did to my sister. More visual exposition than even Clock Tower 3. You touch Mayu and you see her dead and in pain. That's what it looks like to me. And then she she clams up, her heart stops. And her world stops. And she's lost her. I could go on, but you see what I'm talking about? She's just lost her. In her mind. Now she has to try and pray that hasn't happened. And that is true terror. And then after that, you could, like, what information does she have? like in line with this, right? Everything that whatever mom told Alyssa. I hate to start giving a bunch of not careisms. Just throw those out. But we're talking about an 11 out of 10 here, so it has to be done, right? It's got to be done. Whatever her name is, whatever she tells her daughter Alyssa, she's like, I said it was called As Your Neighbor. Someone who's not in the know would say this is called an As You Know, because of how blatant it is. Alyssa's reading a letter, and the letter goes from her mother. Alyssa, I know this is sudden. You were only however many years old when I sent you away from home and had you go to this boarding school. I know you were so depressed and you hated to leave your friends. The reason that I made you do this, because I couldn't tell you back then, now I have to tell you. It is approaching your 15th birthday rapidly, and you need to understand the perils that will await you as soon as you reach your 15th birthday. When the clock's... Basically, anything that is... Not everything, but anything that is immediately pertinent to her situation. Right, to her living. Which is, your 15th birthday's approaching. When the clock strikes midnight, be hidden. Basically, as soon as your 15th birthday has come, be hidden. Go into hiding and don't leave until your 15th birthday is over. Now, how she's going to be able to keep track of the time, I'm not sure. I really don't know. Maybe she'll like hide in like a trash bin and keep a calendar on her and watch the I don't know, the rising and setting of the sun. It's like, I don't know. But it's something. And Miyu has nothing. Miyu doesn't have shit. She doesn't have jack. She doesn't have any way to know what's going on except for how she feels, which is terrible. Again, it's just awful. I'm not trying to exaggerate this. All she knows is what she's done to her sister and what she wants to do for her sister, which is save her sister's life, and she's nearly killed her sister. That's all she knows. That's not going to help her survive anything that's coming up potentially. And while that might not matter as much in the context of just an introduction scene, it does matter in what's going on in her psyche as this forest melds into pure wickedness, and we are wondering what the fuck is going on and what could possibly happen. And our minds are running wild. We don't know anything. We don't have any grounding, any basis upon which to have any sense of security. And in Clock Tower 3, Alyssa does. Because Alyssa knows what even if she's gonna forgo all that and just straight up leave her mother's request aside and go to her mother. She has the option because she knows what her options are. She knows what her two choices are. They've been presented to her in the letter and through the subtext from the letter, which are the former being go into hiding. And the subtext is the obvious reverse, that you don't really have to, it's implied. Don't go into hiding. Now she chooses option B, but all that time until basically until her 15th birthday, she had the choice to do whatever the hell she wanted. Maybe. I don't know, maybe she got to that house and might have sped up things, maybe. But that's hindsight bias. I mean, you could say it foresight too, like if you're really thinking of that. I don't know. They don't say when her birthday is. Her birthday might have been like they time skipped to take her to the place, so I don't know. I'm gonna assume for scariness sake that by the time she got to that house, it was her 15th birthday. But even then, up until she got to that house, she could have been hiding that entire time, through that entire process. Right? She left from her wherever the hell boarding school to go to wherever the hell lodge. So they obviously were not close to each other. She sent her away, her mother, to go to some far-off boarding school. Enough time to find some hiding place. And she has the tools, the knowledge, to figure out that she has that knowledge, that tool at her disposal. Miyu, again, has none of this. Miyu, she doesn't know her sister's status at all. Alyssa doesn't either. She's holding out hope that her mom is alive, but like for, more or less, all intents and purposes. I hate saying that ever since that dude from the Velvet Crow shit, the Reddit nerd, I hate saying that phrase now. That dude just killed that shit, ran it straight into the ground, all intents and purposes. But we'll take it back. For all intents and purposes, Alyssa knows that her mom is dead. She just does. She does. Like, why would she not trust this random guy? Why wouldn't she? Your mother said she had somewhere to go. Little did she know she won't be coming back. Ever. You're all alone in this world now, little girl. You'll be mine. So, anybody with some common sense, who doesn't even have to be a film buff or a game buff or a literature buff or a TV show or drama buff or whatever, is going to know that either that dude murdered her mother, or that dude knew of her mother's death, or that dude oversaw her mother's death. Just like that. Or that dude just put her mother out of the picture somehow, or like, who knows? Like anything made it so her mother is never coming back. Y'all don't even say bribe her, so she's gotta be blackmailed. She can't come back here anymore on pain of whatever. Her daughter's life, anything. I could get pettier, but you get the point. She already don't got her dad, so there's like anything. You could say that he kidnapped her and just dropped her off somewhere. She has no idea where, she can't ever find her way back. I don't know, drugged her and she's brain dead or something. You could say literally whatever you want. The point is that Alyssa is assuming the worst. And the worst, regardless of what you want to think that it'll be, but I think it's death. In any case, it's her mom not being active, not being there for her, not being there to console her, not being there to help her, not being there to get her through this, not being there to comfort her in the face of this demon who's in front of her. She's gone. And so Alyssa knows she has to toughen up. Alyssa knows that she is missing a key figure in her life. Someone whom she loved very dearly, someone who loved her. She knew that her mother loved her, and she knew that her mother was looking out for her. And now that she knows her mother is dead, she also knows to be more on alert, to be more on guard, to be more wary, basically. Again, we don't know for sure. I mean, she doesn't know for sure whether her mother is dead or not. But it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, what matters is her thoughts. And she's thinking it. And Miyu, she doesn't even have that sense of closure. She's got to wonder. And she's got to hope for the best. And that's it for that, Terse. Way over 20 minutes. Take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.